esto, así que
No lo estás haciendo muy
me
bien.
lo perdona si hago algunos errores. Pero,
No, está muy bien.
Okay.
So do you want me to start with introducing myself?
Can you spell it?
My name, Maria Lucia Parra.
Can you spell your last name?
Parra.
He wants you to spell it.
Oh, spell it, P-A-R-R-A.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, thank you so much for being here today.
thank you.
We love the fact that we have some perspective here at the conference from a research point of view. Market research is really important. From your perspective, what are some trends that you're seeing in some of the industries that you're focusing on? I know you've spoken to, you have finance, entertainment. Is there anything that comes to mind that's really a trend for multicultural marketing?
Yeah, what is happening a lot is like 10 years ago, you used to see these market research projects where you have 10, 15, 20 focus groups among Hispanics, everything in Spanish, maybe sometimes bilingual, but it was everything in Spanish, a lot of investment in Hispanic, on acculturated Hispanics. That is not a reality anymore, which is not good for research companies as Ingenium. What we are doing right now and what companies are doing, and that's the reason why we have to adapt as well, is that it's more like total market research or multicultural research, where there is a project that includes a couple of Hispanic groups in one or two markets, sometimes it's even one group. Sometimes what they do is that they include a couple of Hispanic respondents within a focus group, but it's not anymore the Hispanic project. Most of the things are mostly bilingual or in English, and in some point that is good, because what we can see is that the bicultural market is the one that is growing faster, the bigger, that you cannot go to Spanish only anymore, that the big chunk is with all those Hispanics that were born here, that speak more English, that feel more comfortable in English, but at the same time, putting everything in the same bucket is risky, because you are not understanding the culture deeply as we used to do it years ago. So if you have, like for instance, in a focus group, 6 general market respondents and 2 Hispanics, they're not going to be comfortable to share all the thoughts or emotions that they have, those cultural values that if they could do it if they were in a focus group setting with only Hispanics. I think that we have to understand the total market strategies. That's good, we understand that, but we have to be very careful that not including them in the same bucket, always giving some space to only Hispanics and understand those Hispanics, and still take into consideration language. Of course, we can do more research in English with Hispanics nowadays than compared to years ago, but there is still an unacculturated market that is important, and also Spanish is still relevant even if they speak English and they don't feel comfortable speaking Spanish. What we see a lot when I'm doing research and I have like an advertising piece in Spanish, and I show them, okay, what do you think about this advertising piece? Even if, and a question that is very common is it important to have this advertising piece in Spanish even though you speak English even more fluently than Spanish? And what they usually say is that yes, because this shows that the company matters about Hispanics, that we are important. I can read this, or I can navigate, for instance, this website in Spanish, in English or in Spanish, and maybe I feel more comfortable navigating the website in English. But my parents, my grandparents, they still need the language. They still need to do this in Spanish. So, of course, things are evolving, but we still have to pay a lot of attention in language and a lot of attention on those unacculturated Hispanics that are still there, and still assign a space to deeply understand the culture.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. With that, so obviously Latinos, we are like a big basket of different cultures.
Yes.
Right? We have like people from, South America, we have people from the Caribbean. Do you see any differences that come to the top when you do some of your like market research? Do you do market research in specific sort of Latino segments, or is it mainly the general market for Latinos, right? That's a conversation that's been coming up recently.
Oh, that's a great question, and it was my biggest frustration when I started doing research here in the US, because when I was doing research in Latin America, you would segment groups by city, by country, and here then you have to put all them together in the same group.
Yeah.
And it's not the same a Mexican than an Argentinian. So what I try to do is I try to have what is representative to each market. So for instance, I always recommend a client that has representation nationwide to go to different markets, not only LA. Usually people, what they want to do is to go only to LA or Texas, where is the biggest representation of the Mexican respondent, and still Mexicans are the majority of the Hispanics here.
Sure.
But they also have to include New York, because New York is a different market. New York is more Dominican, more South Americans, and they behave completely different than the Mexicans that you have in LA or in Texas. Same with Miami. Miami is more South American, sometimes it's more affluent, completely different than other markets. Even with the Mexican market, markets. It's not the same doing research in Chicago, that is more more acculturated Mexican Hispanic market, than doing research in LA or in Texas. Like in LA, you can still find people in LA that have been to this country, that moved to this country 30, 40 years ago, and still live in this Spanish silo and do not speak English, and all their friends and family and coworkers speak only Spanish. So that's a less acculturated market, and it's because they have the option to do that. They don't have the need to acculturate, because everything there is Latino, is Hispanic, is in Spanish. But the Mexican that is in Chicago, things are different. Of course, there are Hispanic areas, but it's not as common as in LA. So they need to acculturate. They need to learn the language better. So you have to, if you really want to understand the Hispanic market, what I recommend clients is to invest in at least 1 or 2 or 3 different markets, not only one, unless they only have presence in that specific market. Other than that, I always recommend going to New York, Miami, Houston or Dallas, and LA.
Yeah. So what you're saying is a regional approach is sometimes really important.
Yes, yes. Of course, then in the same group, we're going to have different countries of origin, but what we do is what is representative of the market. So in Texas or in LA, we're going to have more Mexicans. But if we are in New York, I try to avoid having Mexicans in a focus group. And what I do is that I have more Dominicans. If I am in Miami, I tend to have more Cubans or South Americans in the group. That is what is representative of that market.
That market, absolutely, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Moving on to a different question. So digital is at the forefront of marketing, right? I think it's probably at the forefront of market research. How has that played a role in your market research?
It plays a very important role. Initially, there was a lot of hesitation because I don't know where there is that thought that that Hispanics are not online. Now people are learning that that Hispanics over-index and they have
they over-index. Yeah, it's surprising.
Exactly. But when people started doing online research years ago, Hispanics were not an option. Like there was a perception that you cannot conduct research online with Hispanics because they don't know how to use a computer, or maybe they don't own a computer. But the reality is that Hispanics have family back in Latin America. And the way to communicate with our families is via a computer, a webcam, and nowadays with a smartphone. So they do know how to use a computer. They do know how to connect to an internet and to use a webcam. And if they don't know, they have they have children that can help them. So what I've been doing a lot over the past 5 years is when the client doesn't have the budget or the time to go to different markets, and depending on the topic, it's very effective with that. For instance, if we're doing concept testing or advertising testing, doing webcam interviewing. It's a great tool because you can conduct between 10 to 15 interviews per day in different markets. So usually what I do, and this is webcam interview, you still interact with the respondent, you can see them, you can show them concepts, you can show them advertising pieces, and what I can do is that I can start doing interviews in the morning with New York, then I move to Miami, then I move to Texas, and I finish conducting interviews at night with LA. So in one day you can cover 4 or 5 markets, something that you couldn't do if you are traveling to all those markets. It's cost effective, and it's incredible the insights that you can have. And sometimes when respondents are online, they feel more comfortable sharing their thoughts. So when I'm doing focus groups, I tend to have smaller groups, like no more than 4, because since they are there, but they are not there, they are not shy. They tend to participate more and share more thoughts than if they were in person with you.
It's much easier behind a screen.
Yes.
Always. So last but not least, multicultural marketing sometimes falls at the bottom of the list of priorities. What advice do you have for people either on the research or the marketing side to help push the agenda for multicultural marketing?
That it's important to understand the cultural values, that we cannot pretend that if we have an advertising piece and we just translate it into Spanish is going to work. We need to understand, we still have to create in the stereotype of translating. We need to understand what is culturally relevant and what connects with Hispanics. So even, and of course the first thing that is cut is usually the budget for Hispanics, but still allocate some kind of budget to understand those values and understand that things that you are trying to use for a total market strategy are going to work with Hispanics, or if there is cultural nuances that you have to highlight.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you.